Hello and welcome to Bob's Garden. Today we're going to explain how to take a plant in a container and repot it. Now why do we want to repot? Well, eventually a plant in a container will outgrow its container. You'll get growth here, you'll get growth in the roots, and it will get very tight in here, and when you water, the water won't flow through. It'll just be sitting on top. That's a good sign. When the water sits on top after you've tried water, it's a very good sign that it's going to need repotting. So we're going to show you how to do this with this ficus, but it's adaptable to other plants, and we use different mixes for different plants that we want to repot. At some point we're going to show you how to do cactus and succulents and all kinds of other plants, but for now we're just going to do this ficus. So when we begin to repot, we want the soil to be on the dry side. So don't water immediately before repotting. Let it get the soil get a little dry, because you won't be able to mix in the soil, the new soil that you're putting into this pot. So you'll see that this is barely damp to the touch, and in that, sometimes, especially if you're working outside in the sun and you don't have a lot of shade, or even in a house like I'm doing here, you would like to have a spray bottle to keep the root ball damp. You'll need a pair of scissors, a good pair of scissors, and we'll need our soil. So here we have a good quality, high quality potting soil. This is ProMix BT, and there are a lot of varieties of soil out there that you can use, but get a good one and make sure that it doesn't have the fertilizer in it. Those fertilized soils are for containers that are outdoors, not for indoors. I like to use my fertilizer separately and mix it up myself rather than having something that's always in there. Another thing you're going to need is a flat knife. This is a butter knife. Don't use your good silverware. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to run this between the pot and the plant and the soil. We're going to go all the way around, and I've already done that. Save time. And we're just going to pop this out, give it a little wiggle, and you can see it's fairly hot now. So what do most people do? They'll take a plant like this and they'll see that it's root bound, and they'll get a larger pot and they'll put this into a larger pot. Now whenever we do this, we want to go from a smaller pot. If we had a smaller pot and we wanted to plant something out of this, repot something out of this, we would go to the next size up. We wouldn't go to this, from here to here, because the plant is going to spend all its time after you transplant it. It's going to spend all its time filling up with roots, and it's not going to grow. So we just want to go up to the next size pot. Well, in this case, if we went to the next size pot, this pot would be even bigger, and the tree would get even bigger, and at some point it's going to get so big, one of us is going to have to move out of the house. It's either the plant or it's me. So we're going to take this and we're going to put it in the same pot. We're borrowing this technique from the art of bonsai. We're going to be balancing the roots with the foliage. When we cut, and I'm not going to cut this now because ficus will bleed and has sap which gets sticky. It can get a little irritant. Some of you might want to wear gloves if you're doing a ficus. It doesn't bother me. But we're going to balance the foliage with the root ball. When we cut, these leaves contain carbohydrates. We cut that, we're going to have less carbohydrates, and the plant is going to supply itself with more nitrogen. So we change this carbohydrate to nitrogen ratio whenever we prune. So if we reduce this foliage, we don't need this big amount of roots to supply it. But if we're going to cut roots, we always must cut the foliage. You can't just cut roots. One thing we want to be careful about when we have a pot is to make sure there are drainage holes. A lot of pots don't have them. I had to drill the drainage holes into this particular pot. So we're going to get some drainage stone here. This is 3/4 inch rocks. They've been washed. It's important to wash them because if they're filled right from the bag, you use them right from the bag, it's got a lot of dust, and that dust clogs up the aeration. So we want to keep the aeration in it. So we put down about an inch worth of drainage stone in here. And I have this other product here. This is Espoma Soil Perfector. It adds extra drainage, and we use this in our cactus and succulent mix. It's a good product, so we'll put some of that in here. It's a good idea to wash that as well. And now we can put some of our ProMix soil in here. I just kind of judge where I am. I want to see, and you see also here, take a look at this. The soil is washed away from the roots, so that was a good indication that I was needing to repot. So first, I'm just going to check this before I do anything else to make sure it's the right height. We don't want to come up all the way up to the top here, because then you water and then all the soil spills out the sides of the pot. So this looks pretty good to me. I'll just put a little bit more in there. Make a big mess. And that's gonna look good. Okay, so now, forgot to mention another very expensive and important tool. It's just a chopstick, and I just put this into the pencil sharpener. And we can use this chopstick to help break up the soil. So we come around here, and you see how tight this is. We get a close-up of that, and you can see how the roots are coming out here. So we're going to go all the way around through here. Make a huge, huge mess. Looks like the newspaper is not doing a good job here. Now you see this section here is a little wetter, so it's going to be a little bit more difficult to work the soil in there. And I just keep on rotating this all the way around. Get some of this older soil off of here. And we start to tease the roots out. We don't want to be overly cautious, but we also don't want to be overly aggressive. Nothing to really worry about. We're going to be balancing this root mass with what we have on top. So you see these roots are kind of tangled up, and what happens is they start to go all the way around and around the pot, and that impedes our drainage. So this is pretty good. Now we can cut some of the roots. So we just come straight across here. Very easy. These are nice fine roots that shows that it's healthy plant. When you see the white in here, that shows that the tree is very healthy. And what we want to do is we want to make a bird's nest. And you'll see that the soil from underneath here we take some of the soil from the center, like this. And we'll cut these roots. And make a hollowed out bird's nest from the center of the plant. And then we're going to follow this all the way around and cut these roots. And this is going to develop a nice root ball. Okay, so now when we have that bird's nest in here, we have it hollowed out on the bottom. So we're going to take some soil and we're going to build it up in the center. And we're going to wiggle that down onto that so that the soil in the pot meets right into this area here. So here we go. And we can just push it back and forth like this. That's a technical term, squish. And then I like to kind of get it somewhat towards the center of the pot. And now we just put in the fresh soil. This tree's going to be so happy when we're done. Now we could have put this down a little lower, but I like the exposed roots like this. It looks kind of neat. We could have planted it a little bit deeper, but we certainly don't want to plant it with these roots below the soil because they've been exposed for so long. I was developing this for bonsai. In bonsai we would be potting down into a smaller pot, and then we do that year after year and then keep on getting it down into a smaller pot, keep on pruning this down, and that's the way we would do it for bonsai. But this is a house plant and it's not going to get too large for our small house. So now we take this chopstick and we start working in this fresh soil into the mass of the soil that's down in there. And you see, as we do that, the soil kind of naturally falls down. And we'll work that in for quite some time until it's all settled in. And then after we've done that, now I'm going to prune. I didn't prune earlier because this gets sap on it, as I explained. And so we're just going to take this down because we removed roots. We don't need all this foliage. It's going to be having too much. And when I cut this, I'm cutting at the junction between the leaves. Now if we want, we'll show you this later, we can take this and we can make a cutting. So I'm going to put this in water for now, and then on the next Bob's Garden we'll show you how to start a cutting from this ficus. So we'll put those over on the side. I won't make a lot of cuttings. I have quite enough plants, at least for now. So we don't have to take off a lot because we didn't take off many roots. We'll cut this back, give it some shape, and we're all set. I'll finish with my chopstick putting that in, and now it's gone back into the same pot. We're maintaining this balance between the roots and the foliage. This keeps the carbohydrate-nitrogen ratio in stasis. It can always stay like this. It'll be about 2 to 3 years before this needs to be repotted again, and we'll just do the same process. Take the same plant, put it back into the same size pot. Then you never have to have this huge tree in your house unless you want to. So we've finished putting the soil back into this pot, and I mentioned before we could use the chopstick to get it into the center here, but you could also spread your fingers out like this and just, we don't want to compact the soil, we just want to push it down in there. And then once we get that all set, then we'll move it to where it's located, and then we'll water it. I water after moving it because it gets pretty heavy. So we'll get this to where we need to. We get our watering can, wet the foliage and the soil at the same time, and then wait for it to drain through completely. It should be dripping from the bottom, and then you're done watering. Thanks for watching, and remember, be curious, not judgmental.